Okay, so all right, so just give me 2 seconds and then go, and I'll tell you when it's done. Go ahead.
Which setting is it on?
Second bar mitzvah, is that this or you don't?
No, you can take that out.
Is this the one that you usually have it on?
No, actually, so let's start with that. And then let's bring this over here. Now, all right, put that sort of just center.
Middle of the magenta bead.
Yeah. And when I tell you to,
Okay. I'm just watching your hands for thumbs up.
I'm sorry.
what'd you say, Howard? Okay, let's just try original sound. Do that one more time. Sorry, go ahead and do it one time. Yes, that sounds like
Okay, should I try and sing and do it at the same time?
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, we did it, people.
Yay!
We did.
In record time.
In record time.
We should get a Guinness Book of World Record.
You know what it's like? It's like the pit crews, in a car, at NASCAR.
Yeah.
And I've never been a NASCAR person, but you have to just learn what things go in what order and how you do it. Well, a little bit of exercise early in the morning, right? That's not a bad thing. I don't think.
You want to table here or?
No. Everything is good here. I would just, tell people to be cautious if any, for the throngs of people coming. We'll make sure. Anyway, don't worry. What I was saying, Howard, was just because normally I have a couple minutes just to find the page numbers ahead of time for the Torah reading. So if between now and the Torah reading, you happen to find the pages for the beginning of Noah,
Okay.
I know you will. You're our most reliable guy. You're our Noah.
I got a good story about Adam, joke. I don't think.
What I was going to say, maybe not, not while the cameras are rolling, but I'll enjoy it afterwards for sure. And good Shabbos to everybody watching. And as always, I'm just going to quickly, while the cantor gets us warmed up, make sure that it's actually streaming the places it's supposed to be streaming. So cantor, maybe you can get us started. I will say that is really a very strange experience because I'm standing next to you playing. I'm watching the screen over here where you can see us in real time, and then I watch us on like a 15-second delay. So
And the screen is like a
and
millisecond delayed.
And you'll be the only person that appreciates this, but I was watching the What If stuff on Disney on the
I
Marvel.
have not gotten around to
It's
that one.
Awesome, and it's all about
Aaron's a big fan of
multiverses and stuff.
He tells me the plot of each episode.
It's
when they come out.
it's really good. Anyway, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So we're gonna get started, and I think we're on page 186. Very good. Tovu, page 192. We're now to page 194. Turn now to page 196. Baruch atah Adonai asher biado nefesh kol chai v'ruach kol basar ish. We'll rise now in body or spirit as we turn to page 198. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasach v'ivina lavchin ben yom uven laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzokech yefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokach haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish harumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten layach koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ma'avir sheina me'einai utnuma me'afapai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani b'tzelem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael b'gvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifara. Please be seated. We're now on page 205. We'll read together the second reading down from the top of the page. From the cowardice that shrinks from new truth, from the laziness that is content with half-truths, from the arrogance that thinks it knows all truth, O God of truth, deliver us. Blessed is Adonai, teacher of Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, hamelamed Torah le'amo Yisrael. Page 206. Elu devarim she'en lahem shiur, she'adam ochel perotehem ba'olam hazeh, ve'al keren kayemet lo le'olam haba, ve'elu hen kibud avaim ugmilut chasadim, ve'hashkamahat beit hamidrash shacharit ve'aravit, ve'achnasat orchim uvikur cholim, ve'achnasat kalal vayat hamet v'yun tefillah, ve'havat shalom ben adam la'chavero, ve'talmud Torah keneged kulam. We rise as we turn to page 212 for the opening blessing of Pezukei Zimra. Baruch she'amar ve'haya ha'olam baruch hu, baruch oseh bereshit, baruch omer ve'yoseh, baruch ozer u'mekayem, baruch merachem al haaretz, baruch merachem al habriot, baruch meshalem sachar tov l're'av, baruch adad ve'kayam lanetzach, baruch podeh u'matzil, baruch shemo. Bishvachot u'vizmirot negadelcha, unshabechecha nefercha v'raskir shimcha v'namlichecha, malkeinu Eloheinu, yachid chei ha'olamim, melech meshubach u'mefu'ad eyad shemo hagadol, baruch atah Adonai, melech mehulal v'tishbachot. Please be seated. We're on page 214, the second line down from the top. Tov lehodot l'Adonai, Tov lehodot l'Adonai, ulezamer le'shimcha elyon. Tov lehodot l'Adonai, להגיד בבוקר חסדך, להגיד בבוקר חסדך, ואמונתך בלילות, ואמונתך בלילות, טוב להודות לאדוני. עלי אסור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון בכינור, כי שימחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידך רנן. מגלו מעשיך ים, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מגלו מעשיך ים, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מגלו מעשיך ים, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך, עוד יהללוך. אשרי ואנחנו נברך ים מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם, הללויה, 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 hallelujah, hallelujah. Psalm 150, page 218?
Yep, 218.
Kol Chai, Tevarech et Shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. Continue silently on page 219. We're now on page 220, very top of the page. Ilufinu male shira kayam ulshonehinu rina kamon galav vesiftotenu shevach marcheve rakiyam ve'einenu meirot kashemesh v'chayareach Ve'yadenu frusot kenishrei shamayim Ve'raglenu kalot kahayalot Ein anachnu maspikim lehodot lecha Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotinu ve'imoteinu. We continue silently. We're on page 222, middle paragraph. Shochen ad marhom kadosh shemo v'chatu v'hanenu tzadikim Adonai la'yesharim la'avat tehilah befi yesharim titalalu divrei tzadikim titbarachu b'lshon hachasidim titramamu b'kerev kedoshim titkadashu ma'kehalot ribevot amcha beit Yisrael berinait va shimcha malkeinu bechol dor Ador yababai yababai bye 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 yababai yababai bye bye yai bye bye yai bye bye yababai bye 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 ay yababai yababai yai bye bye. We'll rise in body or spirit as we turn to page 223 for the closing blessing of Psukei de Zimra. Remain standing through the Chatzi Kaddish and the Baruch Hu on the next pages. Yishtabach shimecha alad malkeinu ahel hamelech hagadol v'hakadosh b'shamayim u'ba'aretz ki lecha na'e Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu sherushvacha lo v'zimraha u'zumemshalaha netzach gedula u'gvura tila v'tiferet kedusha u'malchut Brachot ve'hodaot me'ata v'yad olam baruch atah Adonai el melech gadol batishbachot el hahodaot Adonai niflaot abocher b'shirei zira melech el chei ha'olamim Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba ve'amad yibrachirtei v'yamlich malchutei V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael B'hagala u'bizman kariv v'imeru Amen Yesh me'rabba mevarach le'lam li'al me'al Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitramaham v'yitnaseh v'yitadahar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'imeru Amen Barechu et Adonai hamevorach Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam vahen. Please be seated. We're now on page 228.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu
230. Page 232.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Continue on page 234. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ושוכבך וקומך וקשרת מאוד על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בעיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. We're on page 236. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר אל בני Israel, V'amarta lehem, V'asu lahem tzitzit, Al kanfei bigdeihem ledorotam, V'nadu al tzitzit, Hakanaf b'til techelet, V'haya lachem letzitzit, Uritem oto, Uschartem et kol mitzvot Adonai, V'asitem otam, V'lo taturu acharei levavchem v'acharei nefem, Asher atem zonim achareihem, Leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, V'yitem kedoshim le'elokechem, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Asher hotzeiti etchem mi'eretz Mitzrayim, Liot lachem Elohim, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Adonai Elohechem, Emet. Let's read on page 237 at the bottom. Life without integrity is like loosely hanging threads, easily fraying from the main cloth, while in acts of piety we learn to understand that every instant is like a thread, raveling out of eternity to form a delicate tassel. We must not cast off the threads, but weave them into the design of an eternal fabric. Each day points to eternity. The fate of all time depends upon a single moment. We turn to page 240, Micha Mocha. In body or spirit as we begin the Amidah together on page 242. We then continue silently. Please go at your own pace, and when you're finished, you may be seated. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufiai tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. you're still doing your silent Amidah, please continue at your pace. The rest of us will turn to page 324, the repetition of the Amidah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, V'Koneh HaKol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה נלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם מכלכל חיים בחסד מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לישני עפר, מי כמוך בגבורות, ומדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. Page 326. נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמם כך כתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה על זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל הארץ כבודו אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו מה אדיר שמך בכל הארץ ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו אחד הוא אלוהינו הוא אבינו מלכנו ומושיענו והוא ישמיענו ורחמיו לעיני כל חי אני אדוני אלוהיכם ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור הללויה. Page 328. לדור ודור לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד גודלך לדור ודור לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש קדושתך נקדיש ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. Okay, please be seated. We're on the top of page 329. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת מקדשי שירי שבת כולם יספרו ויתענגו מטובך שבת ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת השפיר רצית בו וקידשתו שבת במנת ימים אותו קראת השבת ישמחו במלכותך Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat V'korei Oneg Shabbat. Zecher L'maseh Bereishit Shabbat. Zecher L'maseh Bereishit Shabbat. Yismechu V'malechutecha. Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat. V'korei Oneg Shabbat. Eloheinu, Eloi Avotenu v'Imotenu, Ritzei, Ritzei, v'Imnuchateinu. Kadeshenu b'mitzvotecha, v'ten chelkeinu b'toratecha. Sahabeinu mituvecha, v'samecheinu b'shuatecha, v'taher libeinu le'ovdecha be'emet, ve'anchileinu Adonai Eloheinu, Elai, 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 Be'ahava v'ratzon Shabbat kodshecha v'nuchuva Yisrael mekadshei shemecha Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. We're now on page 330. We'll read together in English. On this Shabbat day, as you graciously receive our prayers, help us to hear your call. Grant us enough health to fulfill our duties and the compassion we need to attend to others. Teach us humility that we may perceive our own faults, and grant us the wisdom to be forgiving of others. Give us the courage to be true to our highest selves and the charity to see the best in those around us. Give us patience enough not to become discouraged, hope enough to overcome all fears for the future, and faith enough to know your presence. O source of blessing, look with favor upon us. May our offerings be acceptable to you. Baruch atah Adonai, shotcha levadcha birad nabon. We turn to page 332, beginning at the bottom of the page. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations. Modim anachnu lach. For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons, modim anachnu lach. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements, modim anachnu lach. For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression, modim anachnu lach. For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared, modim anachnu lach. For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom, modim anachnu lach. For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose, modim anachnu lach. We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulachaneh lehodot. Sim Shalom, page 334. Sim Shalom, tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu, v'hakol Yisrael amecha, Orcheinu yotzreinu kulanu kechad, ve'or panecha, ki ve'or panecha natata lanu, Adonai Eloheinu. Sim shalom, tova ubracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yisrael amecha, Torat chaim ve'ahavat chesed, u'tzedaka u'vracha berachamim v'chaim chesed verachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha ve'tov beinecha levarech et amcha Yisrael bechol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שים שלום טובה וברכה חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך. ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום. Let's read together on the bottom of page 336. I need strength, humility, courage, patience. Strength to control my passions, humility to assess my own worth, courage to rise above defeats, patience to cleanse myself of imperfections, and wisdom to learn and live by our sacred teachings. Let me not be discouraged by my failings. Let me take heart from all that is good and noble in my character. Keep me from falling victim to cynicism. Teach me sincerity and enthusiasm. Endow me with perception and courage, that I may serve others with compassion and love. Oseh shalom bimrama, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Good Shabbos, everybody. Good Shabbos, everybody. Good Shabbos. Thank you to Howard, by the way, who saved me this morning and gave me the page numbers for everything ahead of time. And at this point, I've learned a good amount of Hebrew, a certain amount of Aramaic, but most important in my career, I have learned to read Howard, which is very important. I actually this is not the pot calling the kettle black very much. My handwriting is the worst in the world. But if you're going to be following in the women's commentary this morning, you're looking for page 37, and if you're in the Plat Chumash, you're on page 59, and it's Parshat Noach, beginning of the Parsha, and we'll read what in effect is usually the first two aliyahs in just a little bit. But, here we get to probably in the collection of stories and mythologies of the world, right? The story of Noah, the story of the flood, and if you happen to be an academic type to, call out Gilgamesh in a moment like this, but, right, this is one of the oldest sort of known stories that we have. It's also one of the first examples, not the first, but one of the first examples on a large scale in which we see God's capacity for, first of all, anger, right? Upset, frustration, and eventually for the acting out upon that anger of really what is total destruction. And, this again is not the first story in the Torah. We've gone through Adam and Eve, we've gone through Cain and Abel. We have a certain kind of sense that the relationship between God and God's creation is tentative at best to begin with. But I think we're all always a little bit challenged by the idea that God is quick enough to destroy, right, an entire world, even if that entire world has been behaving, as it tells us at the very beginning of the Parsha, in the worst conceivable way. And rest assured, if you want to know in specific what it is that they're doing, the rabbis have a lot of midrash, a lot of material to tell you in detail what this generation was really capable of. And it's bad. Let's be very frank about it. It's bad. But there is a tension, especially for the rabbis generations later, about how to approach the idea of God as the destroyer, right? God as the angry, God as the upset, God as the frustrated. And it's almost impossible because, theologically, and the rabbis are concerned about this also for what they would sort of refer to, or we would refer to as Amcha, right? The people in general who are hearing these stories, they don't have necessarily the same large context for things. They're not in possession of, all the midrash and all the halacha and all that kind of stuff. What they hear is a real story. And so much so that the rabbis in a different part of the Talmud become concerned about even reading aloud certain sections of the Torah because they're so terrifying, right? Because they are so scary. And there is this tendency, I think, to try to hide some of reality from the people throughout our history, right? In the Torah itself and the rabbis, and really up to this day, we have a tendency to duck some of those moments because we don't like the idea that God is capable of these things. We're really happy with the God that we talk about on Yom Kippur, right? The Adonai Adonai El Rachum V'Chanun, right? This God who's full of compassion. But we get to a story like this, and while there is a certain compassion, without a doubt, right? God doesn't destroy everything. There is an intention to rebuild, but clearly, right? We don't have numbers, but all these lives, all both human and natural, right, that are all destroyed in the process, is very tough. So, when I was preparing for this morning, I was studying, and as I said, we sort of tend to come across I want to stop short of calling it an apologetic, right? But a tendency of the rabbis to read the text in such a way to really, again, put the onus on human beings exclusively, and to say that God's behavior is justified in one form or the other. So one of Rashi's commentaries, I think, speaks to this really very clearly. So he's pointing out what seems like a potential conflict in chronology or in definition between verse 12 of chapter 7 and verse 17. So in verse 12 it says, "Vayehi hageshem al haaretz 40 yom v'arba'im laila," right? That the rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. But then Rashi says, later on in verse 17, and Marsha, you got a book in front of you, you can see it as well, it tells us, right, later on, and the flood was upon the earth. So what he's sort of confused about, right, is I think the timing of all of this, right? Why talk in verse 12 and say that the rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights, and then in verse 17 say that the flood began? Doesn't make any sense, right? If it's been raining for 40 days, one would presume the flood has already come, right? So what is this new flood? So here's what he says, and he explains. The explanation is this. When God poured down the water at first, God made it fall in mercy, right? Berachamim, as it says in Hebrew, gently, in order that if the people would repent, it might prove a rain actually of blessing. But when they did not repent, it then only became a destructive flood. So here again, we get the rabbis, and at first blush, right, it feels much better, right? It feels like not only did God give a proclamation that this was going to happen, but sort of just like the story of Jonah, that there's a potential out, that the people are given a fair warning, that they're given an opportunity to change, and not only to prevent destruction, but as Rashi says here, that all of that rain in abundance, especially in a particular time of year, is actually a blessing, right? It's what helps everything to grow and for life to sustain itself. There's always a delicate balance of that. But as I studied this over and over again, something kept rubbing me a little bit the wrong way, and I think it's this tendency that we always have to explain God in only rachamim terms, right? Only in compassionate terms. And I think that the simple reading, at least the short reading of the Torah, that God is, right, if we are truly monotheistic and we believe that God is the source of all, right, God is the source of all of our emotions, right? The whole pantheon of life is ultimately emanated from God, and that includes sometimes anger and rage and destruction and all of those pieces. And if we see ourselves as attempting to emulate God, if we think that we are only emulating the positive, I think we're not acknowledging the reality internally, which is that we are the same as God in most of these cases, right? When we're frustrated, especially with the work of our own hands, right, our creation, so to speak, doesn't have to be children, right? It can be anything that we're involved in. When it doesn't materialize the way that we expect it to, our natural response is to be angry, and with that anger can very easily come destruction of relationships, of friendships, of entire businesses, all sorts of things, when we act out in that kind of fashion. And I think that what we do, unfortunately, when we take away the capacity to study texts about God with the understanding that anger and destruction is part of God's reality as well, is that we disavow that understanding for ourselves, and we lose the opportunity to see that, right, in all of these stories, throughout the Torah and beyond, we see a development to some degree, which I know, I'm thinking of my medieval philosophy teacher would tell me this is not acceptable, right? But the idea of God being capable of changing, right? It's very non-Maimonidean. But the idea of God being able to develop, right, and to change God's perspective on humanity and relationship with humanity. And if you read the Torah, and you read in particular the prophets all the way through, it's hard not to see that aspect of God. And I feel like we are actually losing something by only teaching God actually was really being compassionate in this case by giving us plenty of time to turn ourselves around. And it's not to take away the Rahmanis part of it, right? The compassionate part of it. That's essential. And in reality, right, in most of these stories, there is a fair warning and an attempt to change behavior for the positive. But as I said, I think that we're doing ourselves a disservice, and I think we're actually doing ultimately God a disservice by trying to rationalize every single story in the Torah only to the positive and only to the perspective of rachamim, of compassion. You may disagree with me, but that's why we have Torah study at 12 o'clock. You can disagree with me all you want, or for anybody in the room who wants to challenge me thusly. But I do think if you spend some time reading the rabbis on this section, you will see countless commentaries, all of which are attempting to basically, right, defend God's behavior in the absolute and to put everything really ultimately on us. And that may be accurate, but I think it's okay to also see the other side of the equation from time to time as having a certain responsibility as well. So, any thoughts on the matter? Marcia, you look perplexed, confused.
Let's start with 600 years old.
Okay.
But that's besides the
I think that would,
point.
right.
On number 12 it says rain fell upon the earth for 40 days and nights. But in 17 it says 40 days the flood was upon the earth, the waters increased and lifted the ark. To me, it's two different terminologies.
Very good.
Okay.
Very good. Very good. Excellent. Ruff took the mask off here.
Still under 600 years.
It feels like myself.
You and me too, brother. Yeah. Look, I tell the joke you told me.
My wife.
I still tell the joke you told me all the time, which is you wake up in the morning, the first thing you say to Anne is, "I'm sorry," right? Which is, I'm starting to see, right?
I hope you quote me.
I did know. So Ravi got something to.
You're absolutely right.
No, you can't say that to a rabbi. That's the end of my career now.
Absolutely right.
That's, well,
There's so many commentaries.
Beautiful.
You
No.
cannot read the Torah and not see that God evolves. And how could God not evolve if God's trying to figure out how to deal with us?
Right.
I mean, how would God know about us? We're so unlike. I mean, God has to figure us out, and it just keeps changing. I mean, you have to deny the reality of the text.
right. That's a very good way of phrasing it. Well,
And then he made a promise that he was never going to do this again. But there have been so many things since that time that to me that there should have been.
I think the only.
Why you gotten rid of a lot of
Well,
things.
the start from scratch model of creation, there's some problems on that level too, but.
So are we all from Adam and Eve, or are we all from Noah and his wife and family?
Well, so Noah is descended from, so the line, at least according to the sort of rabbinic thought, is that we are all connected in that way. But
Later on in Exodus, after the golden calf, God says to Moses, "I'm going to kill them all.
Yep.
I'm going to start over with you."
right,
So has God learned anything? It's Moses who has to teach God. No, we ain't doing it.
we tried that once.
You tried that.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work. God has to deal with us. That's really what it comes down to. Moses has to take God to task.
Right.
For not understanding people.
Right. And the sort of the dialectic nature of this stuff, again, it's part of the reason why I started teaching that class on the prophets. And truth be told, when I started teaching it, I really was actually teaching it from the fact that I like Heschel and I like the book. But the more actually just studying the prophets itself, I realized, right, that for most of us, our only interaction with the prophet is like these snapshots, most of which are from Isaiah, right, that appear in our Haftarah. But otherwise, you miss all of the back and forth dialectic between God and the prophets, in which it tends to get pretty intense, right? It's not so simple, right? And these questions of sort of God feeling and teetering on the one side of overwhelming deen of judgment, and this idea of compassion and rachamim and these things always constantly in the balance. But seriously, now I'm really concerned for my rabbinate, because if you tell me that my sermon was 100% right, once you hear that, the ego just goes out of the world,
I'll tell you why, because you just gave the sermon I gave on Yom Kippur. So, since the two of us agree, you're absolutely right.
So there you go. There must be a certain connection of sorts. Well, so there we go.
It's like, my basic sermon was, if it's Adonai, El Rachum, all that's great. But God also hates things.
Right.
And it says so,
Right.
over and over
Right.
again. I hate justice,
Right.
I hate injustice, I
Right.
hate robbery,
Right.
I hate this. 7 things do I hate, 6 things I hate, 7 are an abomination to the Lord. Certain things are hateful.
Yeah.
I mean, to hate nothing is, and the opposite of hate is not necessarily love, it's apathy. Because if you don't hate something enough, you'll never change it.
I remember, actually, this is the last aside, because we should really end on that. When I was just about to be ordained, they had all of us sit in a room, and Rabbi Rick Jacobs came in, who's the head of the URJ. And so he went around the room, and he asked each one of us to say, like, what is the biggest challenge you see in the Jewish world today, right? You know, what do you see basically as the thing as you're going into being rabbis and cantors, et cetera, what are you addressing? And one after the other, right? Everybody went down the line, and they said all the things that you would think about, and you know, you can figure out in your mind what there are, you know, lacking numbers of people joining synagogues, anti-Semitism, whatever. And it got to me, and without blinking, I just looked at him and I said, apathy. You know, because to me, that's the biggest concern, is if you have like a whole room full of people who just don't give where do you go from there, right? You could take a stubborn person, someone who's really, but at least they're struggling with something, right? The moment that somebody just sits back and says, you know what, I'm done with all this, right? It is an entirely different animal to even begin to attempt to address. And I think that is one of our challenges. And to some degree, it ties back into this idea of how we approach textual study, right? It's not that we have an apathetic approach to it, but we just have a very sort of sit back and receive kind of thing. And the reality is that the rabbis throughout different periods of time, they had internal reasons why they had commentary the way that they did. Part of the reason why, you know, I look at the world the way that I do and it affects my commentary. So if we're not, you know, challenging the commentaries from time to time, it's very easy to see how you get down a path in which basically, right, it's all sunshine and, I don't know, what goes with sunshine.
Always an assurer of sweet things.
Right. When it does, right? When God does, it's tops, but it's not always rainbows, I guess. That's what it's not always rainbows. And on that note, we're going to wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom, and we'll begin Seder Kriyat HaTorah on page 362. I swear to God, it's the most impressive thing to me that you know all of these numbers better than I do. It's like the most amazing thing, you know? It's like, it's good. This is a good thing. So we'll rise again in body or spirit, and just a reminder again, we'll get there in a second. I'll give you the page numbers. Okay, again, page 362. Ein kamocha b'Elohim Adonai v'ein kemasecha malchutcha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha bechol dor v'hador Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai imloch leolam v'en Adonai yahuz lamo yiten Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom Abba harachamim eitiv ha'vertzoncha et Zion Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim Ki recha levad batachnu melech el ram v'nisa Adon olamim Ki mitzion tetzei Torah Ki mitzion tetzei Torah Udevar Adonai Yerushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'kedushato Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo Galul Adonai iti uner homema shemo yachdav lecha Adonai hagedula ve'hagevura ve'hatiferet ve'anetzach ve'hahod ki כי כל בשמיים ובארץ, כי כל בשמיים ובארץ. לך אדוני הממלכה, והמתנשא לכל ראש. Okay, please be seated. Lisa, gonna do that? Very good. Okay, you don't have to come up. You stay right where you are. But here's a giant sheet of paper for you. Let me just make sure it's on the regular side. No. Very good. Okay, so thanks again to Howard. Our page numbers are 37 for the Women's Torah Commentary. Plat Chumash is page 59. In all cases, you're looking for Genesis chapter 6, verse 9. Genesis chapter 6, verse 9. And like I said, we'll read the first two aliyahs worth. Let's see. Everybody on? Okay. All right. At least whenever you're ready. Wait, hold on. Talmud, your Hebrew name? Ayla Basha Bat Yitzchak?
Yes.
L'aliyah Rishona. Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen. Ele toldot Noach ish tzadik, tamim haya bedorotav, et ha'Elohim hitaleach Noach, vayivaled Noach shlosha banim, et Shem v'et Cham v'et Yafet, ותשחט הארץ לפני האלוהים, ותמלא הארץ חמס, וירא אלוהים את הארץ, והנה נשחטה, כי השחית כל בשר את דרכו על הארץ. ויאמר אלוהים לנוח, כעץ כל בשר בא לפני, כי מלאה הארץ חמס מפניהם, והנני משחיתם את הארץ. עשה לך תבט עצי גופר, כינים תעשה את התיבה, וחפרת אותה מבית ומחוץ בכופר. וזה אשר תעשה אותה 300 אמה. אורך התיבה 50 אמה רוחבה, ו30 אמה קומתה. צוהר תעשה לתיבה, ואל אמה תכלנה מלמלה, ופתח התיבה בצדי תשים. תחתים 32 תעשה. ואני הנני מביא את המבול מים על הארץ, להשחית כל בשר אשר בו רוח חיים מתחת השמיים. כל אשר בארץ יגבה. והקימותי את בריתי איתך, ובאת אל התיבה, אתה ובניך, ואשתך ונשי בניך איתך. ומכל החי, מכל בשר שניים מכל, תביא אל התיבה lachayot itach, zachar unekeva yiyu.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen. Yashik koach, Elise. Very nicely done.
Yeah.
Very nicely done.
Nice.
Oh, I gotta start teaching it to someone.
I was as well, you know. Look, he might be teaching it to all the rest of us. Who knows? That's why we need to, get working on our Jewish video game. That's my goal at some point before the end of my career, is to somehow or another use video games to teach children. Whether I ever figure that one out, we'll see. Man's got to have a dream, you know.
You gotta go.
Exactly. Howard, I think we spent too much time together, man. Or maybe not enough. Okay, we're going to turn to page 371 to offer our Misha Berach this morning. Misha Berach Avotenu v'Imotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah Hu Yevarech et HaCholim Ha'elu. We'll begin this morning thinking of those in our community and connected to our community in need of healing. Oren Nachum, Bruce Steger, Chana Ruth Bat Sarah, Jeff Baker, David Tasher, Jim Cohn, Moni, Renee Banks Rathbun, Lindsay Epstein, Dolores Michka, Sylvia Orn, Yerachmiel Ben Hinda, Paloma Chauhan, Samuel Moskowitz, Chaim Leib, Joyce Weinberg, Rick Gold, Stu Pollack, Jane London, Catherine Guarino, Emunah Chava, Judy Stern, Miriam Cornfield, Raz Brody, Chana Ruth Bat Sarah, Fagel Tzipora Bat Elisheva Bat Sarah, Richard Gambino, Michelle Sawicki, Idol Basha Bat Yitzchak, Tzvi Menachem Ben Chaim, Rivka Bat Devora, Amy and Gavin Tucker, Janice Kurz, David Dowling, Israel Ben Yitzchak, Ben Sion Ben Moshe, Lorraine Danis, Buddy Kossoff, Shelley Newmark, David Kyle Klotman, Rivka Bat Rachel, Sarah Bat Chana, Moshe Eliezer Ben Sivia, Peretz Ben Yehuda, Leah Bat Naomi, and Gedalia Ben Leah. And if you're thinking of anyone at home, we certainly invite you to share those names at home. For anybody who's here with us this morning, start on this side. Any names?
Anne Marcotte, Ed Keenan, Loretta, Valsto, Nina Reiser, Mary Moore, Rena, Paul Komsky, Dawn Stapleton, Jane Cox, and Ann and Vicki.
Gerald Hirsch.
And I forgot to mention him last night, but we'll think of Keelan too. Hope his back gets better as quickly as possible. So I doubt he's watching right now, but Keelan will think and hope for that. And again, we'll go back to page 371. Akadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Alehem Lachachalimam Lerapotam Lachazikam Vishlach Lehem Mehira Refuah Refuah Shlema Min Hashamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf Hashta Ba'agalav Zman Kariv Ben Amar. Amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are suffering. May the Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit, and let us say together, Amen. El na refana la, El na refana la, El na refana la, Refuah shalema. El na refana lo, El na refana lo, El na refana lo, Refuah shalema. We'll rise in body or spirit as we turn to page 370 and lift and dress the Torah. And Howard, one other request: if you have a Plat Chumash near you, I realize that the Haftorah I need in a second.
You need it?
Yeah. Okay. Still indebted to Rabbi David for teaching me the mathematics behind all of this. You know, right? It's Archimedes. Is that what it is? Okay. Vezot haTorah she'asa Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Yeah, it's usually right after the, or you can just give me the book. Page 85. Marsha's on. Yeah. 85. Oh, wait, do you have the... We have a couple of the like old plouts mixed in where it goes the other direction. Just for fun. You can all be seated.
That was very confusing what you just said, but this is that one.
Story of my life.
It's very...
The little guy's not working. The little one's not working.
No. So this morning was your classic things, which I thought, oh, I got it all figured out. It's gonna be so much easier this time. What we learned is that all the sound problems we've been having the last few weeks is because Zoom on iPads, you don't really have the same level of control. When you do it on a computer, you can do something called original sound, where it stops. Like Zoom purposely tries to eliminate like background noise and things like that. So on an iPad, you basically just turn it on, and that's as far as you can go. So here I thought, okay, very easy. I'll just bring my laptop from home, and we'll plug it onto the laptop, no problem. Except I forgot the power cord. So basically, we probably would have had enough power to get through maybe 3/4 of the service, but not the full thing. So thankfully, Cantor's like, well, we can do it like we used to, which involves me schlepping my entire computer down here. And in this case, I managed to set it. This was record time. I set it up in probably 6 minutes?
Yeah, like 5
From soup to nuts. Again, I don't know whether there is a side profession in any of this, but I'm building up quite a lot of experience in it, for sure. I was saying last night, David,
I
that
gotta tell you later about JCOH last Sunday, who came downtown.
what was last Sunday?
That was the reading of the Holocaust we had in conjunction with Bay Street over there.
Oh.
It was a reading of a new.
Oh, was that? Oh, okay.
So who came outside, because we had to sit in the bleachers.
Yeah.
Franklin came out.
Oh.
I said, one rabbi to another.
No, very nice. Very nice. I'm glad he welcomed everybody. I didn't even know that was going on. It shows you where my mind's at these
I
days.
sent you regards.
Good. I appreciate it. All right, what would I do without you, man? Really, I'm a lucky guy. I'm a lucky guy. And on that note, Isaiah didn't have anybody like Howard with him, and so he actually had a much harder time as a prophet. It was much more lonely. So we're going to think about him on page 85 as we're reading. It'll be chapter 54, verse 1 to chapter 55, verse 5. And if you're in the Plot Chumash, again, thank you to Marsha, who was on it. 85 is your page. And we'll begin with our blessings before. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratza b'divreihem הנאמרים באמת, ברוך אתה, אדוני, הבוחר בתורה, ובמשה עבדו, ובישראל עמו, ובנביאי האמת והצדק. Sing, O barren woman who has never given birth. Break out in song, you who have never been in labor. A desolate woman shall have more children than a woman who is married, says the Eternal One. Enlarge the space for your tent. Do not spare the canvas for your dwelling place. Do not hold back. Lengthen your ropes. Drive in your pegs. For you shall spread out to the right and the left. Your offspring shall dispossess nations. Cities now deserted shall again be settled. Have no fear. You shall not be put to shame. Do not cringe. Your disgrace is at an end. You shall forget the shame of your youth. No more shall you remember your disgrace as a widow. For your husband is your maker, the one called God of the hosts of heaven, and your Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel, called God of all the earth. The Eternal One calls you wife again, O once abandoned and brokenhearted. Once rejected, says your God, but a young wife still. For a brief moment I forsook you. With abiding love I take you back. In a moment of flooding anger I hid my face from you, but now, with love unending, I take you in, says your Redeemer, the Eternal One. This is like the days of Noah to me. I promised then never again to cover the earth with the waters of Noah's days. So now I promise never again to be angry with you or rebuke you. Though the mountains may depart and the hills be removed, my love shall never depart from you, and my covenant of peace shall not be removed, says the one who loves you, the Eternal. Ah, unhappy storm-tossed soul, with none to comfort you. I will make garnets your building stones and sapphires your foundations. I will build your towers with rubies and your gates with precious stones, your border with gems. All your children shall be taught by the Eternal, and great shall be the happiness of your children. You shall be established in righteousness, safe from oppression and unafraid, safe from terror. It shall not come near you. Should any attack you, it will not be my doing. Whoever attacks you will fall on your account. It is I who created the smith, who fans the coal in the fire and forges weapons by his work. I also create the destroyer to wreak havoc. No weapon fashioned against you can succeed. You shall defeat all who rise to accuse you. This is the heritage of the eternal servants, and I am the source of their vindication, says the Eternal. Come, all who are thirsty, come for water, even if you have no money. Come buy food and eat. Come buy food without money, wine and milk without cost. Why spend money for what is not bread? Why spend your wages for what does not satisfy? Listen well to me, and you shall eat what is good, and your soul shall delight in abundance. Open your ears and come to me. Hearken, and you shall live. I will make an everlasting covenant with you, like the true love I extended to David. As once I made him a witness to the world, a prince and commander of nations, so now you shall summon people you do not know, and people that you do not know you shall come running to, because of the Eternal your God, the Holy One of Israel, who has given you glory. Okay, a lot to unpack there.
Very strong.
Yes, indeed. Page 372, blessing after the Haftarah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, sur kol haolamim, tzadik bechol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer ve'oseh, ha'mdaber u'mkayem, shekol devarav emet v'tzedek, al ha'torah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al nevi'im ve'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh, שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושה ולמנוחה לכבוד ולתפארת על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת אמן.
Defining the barren woman and disgraces the widow.
Yeah. Again, when I'm waiting, I sort of assume at some point, it's probably a lot of work, but that there will be a women's Haftarah commentary, because I'm sure there was a lot to say. It's a very recurring theme, right? It comes up over and over again of the sort of image of the barren woman, the woman who's no longer barren, and God's blessing in that, and it's obviously tied to other instances in the Torah in which that is the case. But it's becoming increasingly challenging, I think, for me to read a lot of these, especially in English, because again, growing up, right, we always heard the Haftarah in Hebrew, and as a kid, I didn't know Hebrew well enough to know exactly what was going on, and it's fairly high-level Hebrew in the first place, so even if you know basic Hebrew, there's a good chance you're going to miss a lot of things. But when you hear it in English, it's rather stark, and, as I said, the most challenging thing is when you have B'nai Mitzvah students, who are like 12 or 13 years old, and they get up and start reading, in our case, we usually have them do it in English. So, it makes for some odd moments. And I think I've heard that there's a movement to potentially think of other sections of the prophets to read. Because, again, going back to our conversation about the rabbis, right? The rabbis had a lot of times they had a larger goal in mind. And so the choice of the Haftarot is tied to the sugya, to the parsha, but that tie can sometimes be really direct and really obvious. And in other cases, they pick up on one theme and they kind of run with it. But I don't know, I just feel like there are other sections of the prophets we never read. It would benefit us to read it.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of barren woman, divorce. I'm just thinking of today's...
This is right, these are images that don't resonate in the same way that they did, quite frankly, up until, probably, I don't know, 100 years ago, probably still this kind of language worked in some form or the other for people. But my guess is a lot longer ago. It probably
50 years.
Yeah, a lot of the world has changed. It's part of the challenge of it, right? Is the texts themselves, the language doesn't change, but how we think about them and what we choose to emphasize, a lot of that does. But we're opening up a big conversation here, so we'll save that for another Shabbos meeting. Page 376. We'll rise in body or spirit as we offer a prayer for our country. O guardian of life and liberty, may our nation always merit your protection. Teach us to give thanks for what we have by sharing it with those who are in need. Keep our eyes open to the wonders of creation and alert to the care of the earth. May we never be lazy in the work of peace, and may we honor those who have died in defense of our ideals. Grant our leaders wisdom and forbearance. May they govern with justice and compassion. Help us all to appreciate one another and to respect the many ways that we may serve you. May our homes be safe from affliction and strife, and our country be sound in body and spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Prayer for the State of Israel, page 377. Avinu Shabashamayim Tzur Yisrael v'goalo barech et Medinat Yisrael reishit tzmichat geulatenu. Hagen aleha be'evrat chastecha ufros aleha sukat shlomecha. Ushlach orcha v'amitcha l'rasheha sareha b'yoatzeha. V'taknem be'etzat tova milfanecha v'natata shalom ba'aretz v'simchat olam liyoshveha. Amen.
Amen.
O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love, spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen. Remain standing as we turn back to page 374. Yehalelu et Shem Adonai, ki niskav Shem lo levado, odo al eretz v'shamayim, vayaharem keren li'amo, tehila lechol chasidav, livnei Yisrael am kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Ki lekach tov natati lachem, torati al tazovu. Etz chaim hi lamachaziki ba, v'tomcheha meushar, deracheha darchei noam, v'chol netivoteha Shalom. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha ben Hashuva. Chadesh, Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Yameinu Remain standing as we turn to page 586 at the bottom of the page. Aleinu l'shabach. Aleinu l'shabach l'adon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoyei haratzot, velo samanu kemishpechot adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, vanachnu korim, ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. We're on page 591. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו Ask those in mourning and those observing yahrzeit to please remain standing. Everyone else may be seated. We think first of those who have passed in our community in recent months. Sylvia Alderman, Morris Dickstein, Fred Eber, Sandra Furman, Evelyn Gelb, Arthur Grossman, Elaine Grossman, Phyllis Katz, Jeanette Kopp, Audrey Lubo, Morty Lynn, Jerry Monroe, Harry Olstein, Danielle Lisa Rigg, Geraldine Rosen, Harriet Roth, Jeannie Rubin, Howard Schreier, Dorothy Shupnick, Paul Silver, Marlise Silverberg, Blanche Sklar, Rita Sandra Snyder, Joan Strong Tangzilius, Virginia Tizer, and Ann Weiss. We also mark the yahrzeits that occurred during the last week for Libby Alpern, Jean Benjamin, Gertrude Bogash, Florence Emanuel, Marcia Gilbert, Theodore Jaffe, Sally Klein, Milton Maisel, Sonia Maisel, Anne Weinberg Moskowitz, Gail Panitz, Samuel Paul, Saul Paul, Ruth Rossick, Susan Judith Ruby, Leonard Sazitsky, and Regina Sperling. Is anyone else this morning saying Kaddish for anybody that we didn't mention? Okay, if you are remembering loved ones at home that we didn't mention, you can certainly mention their names out loud. We will rise as the mourners join me on page 598, reciting the mourners' Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Ve'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon u'b'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. V'agalav izman kariv v'yimru. Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam le'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudsha b'richu. Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechamata. Da'amiran be'alma v'yimru. Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen.
Amen.
Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. Okay, please be seated. For the timing of the church bells, it's just crazy this week. So, some important announcements. First is please join us for Torah study beginning at 12 o'clock on Zoom. A reminder that Niddah Mitzvah will be meeting at 11:30 on Monday, I believe. Yeah, right, I don't think so. The truth is, so, cancel that.
We canceled.
Cancel that.
We canceled.
But the power of it all, right? It's just like this. It's canceled. It is a holiday. No, I was surprised by it also, but
Indigenous Day.
I was just going to say, which is probably a more appropriate day for us, quite frankly. Well, it's a very understandable pushback against celebrating Columbus, which is a much more complicated thing. But don't tell it to Josephine Getling. Whatever you do, as a proud Italian, this becomes a very complicated holiday. In the city, it's a really, oh God. But I believe the Social Justice Committee is meeting on 5 o'clock virtually on Monday. There is no Hebrew school. A reminder, my classes are going to start back up again this week. Wednesday's class is at 12 o'clock, Heschel's book on the prophets. Friday's class on the Siddur and learning more about liturgy and about our prayer service. The only shift is that on Fridays, the class will start at 9:15 instead of 9 o'clock, just the timing of when I got to get Eva on her bus and all that stuff. Beyond that, I think that's it for this week, I think. Howard, anything?
Board meeting.
Oh, right, board meeting. Board meeting. It's a small thing, but yes, thank you for reminding me. Board meeting 7:30 on Wednesday. Cantor, anything? Nope. Rav, anything cool going on? You teaching it?
Story?
Huh?
You want a story?
Well, of course we want a story. Why not?
Okay, so I get a call from a mother who says, you gave my kid the wrong Torah portion. I said, I don't know, let me check. Call her back and say, yeah, he's got the right portion. She said, no, he's got Noah. I said, well, no, he's actually got the next portion. He's got Lech Lecha, he's got Abraham. She said, well, I asked his tutor, and she told me it was Noah. I said, well, you probably just gave her the date.
And she looked at Shabbos instead of the
she
afternoon.
looked, but you have a Mincha Ma'ariv service, and the Torah portion goes to the next one. It's Lech Lecha, Abraham. She
Right.
goes, when did this happen?
I love it. When did this happen?
About 2,000 years ago, I think, something like that. She says, well, I said, what's wrong? Because it's a perfectly lovely portion. I mean, it's not a problem. She said, I have spent $10,000 on Noah decorations for the party, and I'm not changing it.
What are you going to do?
So many things to say right now. So many things, just none of them on camera. But let's,
Did she
That's
take
not-
a tax deduction?
that's, yes, there you go. That's exactly, find some other kid who's having their bar mitzvah and, tell them stuff.
Anyway.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
When did this happen?
When did this happen? I think that to me is like, the $10,000 in Noah stuff is pretty amazing, but when did this happen, I think is the best.
It must be a suburban mother.
At this point, Lord only knows. But, wow. Okay. That was, thank you for that. No. I needed actually a good laugh this morning. Okay. So on that note, we have any Noah-themed end songs for today? I don't think so. But I suppose we could do Adon Olam. It sort of goes back into our cycle of things here. But, all right, 6:25. We'll do Adon Olam. You care what melody? Okay. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yetzir nivra li'nasa b'chefzo kol azay melech shemo nikra ve'acharei ככלות הכל, לבדו ימלוך נורא, והוא היה והוא הווה, והוא יהיה בתפארה, והוא אחד ואין שני, להמשיל לו להכבירה, בלי ראשית בלי תכלית, ולא העוז והמשרה, והוא אלי וחי גואלי, וצור חבלי בעת צרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי ביום אקרא, בידו הפקיד רוחי, בית אישן והעירה, ועם רוחי גביעתי, אדוני לי ולא יירא. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. We're going to turn to page 604 for Kiddush. Get the page, and we'll rise in body or spirit. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. על כן ברך אדוני יום השבת ויקדשהו סברי. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן.
Amen.
L'chaim, Shabbat Shalom. When did that happen? That's just, oh man. Also, I trust the tutor over the rabbi part of it, which we just kind of glossed over. That all power to the tutors, right? I was, a tutor once in my day too. But anyway, let's just.
Are we absent?